Hey, beautiful people. So this one's a bit of a gnarly one. This one is how to handle feedback that you don't agree with. How to stay clear, calm, and capable even when you disagree and even when every atom in your body is disagreeing. Have you ever received feedback that you felt was just totally off? Do you end up getting left wondering whether or not you should defend yourself or whether you should just nod and move along? I want to talk to you about how high trust leaders handle hard feedback without losing trust and without losing their own center of gravity. By the end of the video, I want you to be able to understand exactly how to respond to feedback that doesn't land well with you without shutting down, without lashing out, or without faking agreement. Lots of people have written books on feedback, and I actually find the idea of feedback to be very important in terms of how a system works and putting in feedback loops. But in terms of the way we talk about feedback in organizations today, where you'll sit down with someone and you'll go, I have some feedback to give you. Or someone who really annoys you comes in and goes, I want to give you some feedback. I don't find that kind of way of thinking and talking about feedback to be particularly useful because there isn't a whole lot of commitment from them in that conversation. There's a whole lot of judgment of you in that conversation. There's a whole lot of disappointment in that conversation. There isn't a whole lot of commitment from them to help repair the situation, make you better, help you be stronger, help you be a better leader, help you be a better individual contributor. And so feedback, the way that we talk about it and learn about it and use it today, I find to be kind of annoying and a little bit ineffective. I'd love to introduce you to a much more powerful way of thinking about feedback and therefore thinking differently about how you receive it, how you deal with it, and how you engage with the person who's giving it to you. One of the ways to think about this is not all feedback is valid. So feedback is really someone coming to you and doing what I refer to as declaring a breakdown. Something isn't working between us. Something isn't working in the way that we're engaging. Something isn't working in the way that we're building or not building trust. Something isn't working in the way that you're delivering to my standards versus to yours. And so the conversation then, if you understand that dynamic and you understand the loop in which those conversations happen, you can begin to position yourself differently in that conversation. Because if someone comes into your office or gets on a Zoom call with you or talks to you in the corridor and said, I have some feedback to give you, then your question is to breathe quietly and say, hey, I'd love to hear what it is that you have to say. Are you saying it to me as a customer for me in this particular situation in the way that you've worked with them? Are you giving me this because you're committed to me growing and helping me be a leader? Are you bringing me this because you work for me and there's something I'm not doing for you? So asking the person what the context is in which they're giving the feedback is really valuable for you, and it's also really valuable for them, because there are lots of people who wander around lobbing feedback over the wall at some of us, and they haven't really thought through the context and what's their skin in the game in that. So position yourself as understanding what your relationship is to them that they are giving you feedback from, right? What that will do is it will then help you understand what their skin in the game is. So the conversation might now go to, okay, I recognize that you're my internal customer for this work that needs to be done. And if that's not working for you, I really want to hear about that. I am committed to delivering satisfaction for you. So now what we're talking about is, we're not talking about me as a human being being a complete train wreck and a waste of space and a disaster. What we're doing is we're talking about how you, the person giving me the feedback, and I coordinate well together or not, right? So move yourself out of the space of thinking about it as a criticism of you personally and move into the space of thinking about it as something that's not working in terms of how you engage with this person who you are working with in some capacity. One of the hardest things to do when you are receiving feedback, and you've now done the clarification, is I'm coming and giving you some feedback as your customer and I'm not satisfied. Let's pick that example. And that's a pretty weighty one. And they're an internal customer and you're doing, say, some work for them or you're doing a project for them and they're not satisfied. So what you're looking to do now is to pause, breathe, and listen. That's really hard to do because lots of times life has taught us that when someone gives us feedback, it looks like a physical attack on us and our body responds accordingly. And so what you'll do over time is you'll find that you go from this heightened state of anxiety and you go from your good old fight or flight to you're actually able to sit there and listen to the person and understand what it is that's going on and how you can begin to repair it. So if you pause and you listen, what you're doing then is you're giving them an opportunity to be able to kind of get it off their chest, to be able to talk to you about what's not working, and you're able to respond to it in a way that is constructive rather than a way that is destructive for you and for them, and particularly for your relationship of trust with them. If they're giving you feedback that you really do not agree with, and you feel that they have been very much responsible in the breakdown that has happened, you need to be able to separate your identity from your actions. And what I mean by that is you can say to them, hey, I fully understand that this did not work for you, and I'm sure that you and I can design a way to do it differently going forward, or we can choose not to work together. That's always another option, not the optimal one. I'm sure we can find a way to design it better going forward, and I apologize if it caused inconvenience for you. Let's talk about how we do it better next time. Now I'm not taking that as a personal affront, and I'm separating my identity from the actions that we're going to take going forward. The only thing that I'm showing up with there is a commitment to satisfy them and a commitment to be in integrity with them and a commitment to learn how to work with them differently. In that space of listening and in that space of breathing, you actually open up a room for you to be able to have honest conversations with each other to figure out how you're going to move forward. Feedback is not a definition of who you are. It's someone else's perspective, and that's all it is. So if you want to build a relationship of long-term trust with someone else, you have to acknowledge that that's their perspective. That's how they see things. That's what they consider to be important and valuable. And you need to acknowledge and understand that, but you've got to figure out then together how it is that you're going to meet somewhere in the middle that still provides a level of service and satisfaction for them. One of the things that you can also do is you can do a little bit of inquiry. And lots of times what I found is people are really uncomfortable having conversations around stuff that doesn't work. And some people are very proficient at it and they're wonderful to work with, but most people are very uncomfortable about it. And one of the things that I think is incredibly valuable is that you're able to put yourself in a position of inquiry. Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about that? How is that showing up for you? What's not working for you in there? And then you can get to the point where you're going, look, we're at an impasse and maybe we shouldn't work together. Or you can get to a point where you're saying, there's something we can do to actually resolve this and we can work together and we can produce amazing results together. And what I found over time is that the more competent you can get at going through this process of not judging immediately, of not allowing yourself to be triggered, of being able to step back and be in a place of inquiry and deeply trying to understand where they're coming from and how that aligns with you and with your values and with your intentions, is that you actually create a space for you to be able to have stronger, more powerful relationships going forward, because you've weathered a storm together and you've come out the other side and you have a level of trust with each other and you know that you're going to get better and better at doing this together. The fifth one is to really pay attention to your ability to be able to be declarative and not defensive. I talked about this in the other video that I've done, which is how to get into leadership roles, and go into that in the context of how that shows you, reveals you as a leader. So if you go through that process of being declarative and not being defensive, you are declaring that there's a breakdown, and you're also asking them through the process of inquiry that we talked about a moment ago to build more clarity around what it is that happens. You're trying to see it something from their perspective, and you can also begin to reflect back to them what it is that you're hearing and what your role or responsibility is in that. that's the beginning of really building a bridge and a strong foundation for how it is you're going to work together going forward. The sixth thing that I found to be super important in this process is that you want to be able to circle back. Because you've had this difficult conversation, you've both been through the process, you've listened to each other, you've begun to build a different way of moving forward together, you've committed to not have the breakdown happen again, you've onboarded some of what they said, and you have disagreed with some of what they have also said, but you've reached an agreement overall as to how it is you're going to move forward. One of the things that I found is super useful to kind of cement that is to circle back. And, a week or 2 weeks from the time you've had the conversation, to just check in with them and go, hey, are we doing better? How are we doing together working on this? Are there any more assessments that you want to bring to me? Is there more feedback that you have? Is this working for you? So part of what you're doing is you're kind of cementing what you've built, and you are positioning yourself to be someone who is able to hear feedback, who doesn't necessarily have to agree with it all, and who's committed to building a relationship with the people who bring it to you going forward. As you do that, you are positioning yourself as a much, much stronger leader. I'm not saying for one moment that it's easy. It takes a lot of practice, and there will be moments in your career and in your leadership where you will basically say your values and your interpretation of what it is to work together and to co-invent together is so radically different than mine that I don't think we're going to be effective working together. And that will happen, and you will probably end up leaving roles, leaving jobs, leaving opportunities. But if you can get good at what I just talked about in terms of how to handle feedback that you don't necessarily agree with, and you build those practices for yourself over time, you'll reduce the number of times that happens. I'm in awe of your courage to have this conversation and to engage in this. I wish you the absolute best of luck with it. As you start thinking of building this capacity for yourself, also look at how this makes you more promotable. I have an assessment called my Get Promoted Assessment. There is a link down in the comments below, www.getpromotedassessment.com, and it's also on my webpage. Go there, do the assessment for yourself, and start flexing that muscle of being self-reflective and honest with yourself. It'll really help you with this process, and I wish you the best of luck, and I admire your courage. Good luck.